I was driving once with my ranger and we were in the car and in front of us was a big gray wolf. And he was astonished, both of us, we just stopped breathing.
Welcome to Rewilding the World. I'm Ben Goldsmith and I'm here with Marija Krnjajic from Croatia. And Marija is running one of the most exciting and ambitious rewilding efforts really anywhere on the continent of Europe, in the Velebit Mountains. It's one of the mega landscapes that are under the supervision and restoration of Rewilding Europe. Marija, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Ben, thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure.
I've only been to Croatia once, a long time ago. I think I was 20 or 21. And I was invited on a gullet, like a little wooden sailing boat, to sail down the Dalmatian coast with some friends. And we sailed from Split, which is made of beautiful white marble, I think Roman Emperor Diocletian's palace a long time ago. We sailed all the way down through the islands, past the island of Hvar and down to Dubrovnik. And I was just blown away by how wild that coastline is. But I've never been to the interior of Croatia and I've never been to the Velebit Mountains. And I've always been amazed to hear that it's really one of the most pristine and wild mountainous landscapes in the whole of Europe, with tremendous wildlife abundance and a real effort and enthusiasm on the part of the government and local community to keep it that way. So how did this come about? Tell me the story of the Velebit Mountains.
The Velebit Mountain is one of the most unique places in Croatia. It is the largest mountain range in Croatia. It is 2,200 square kilometer range, and the whole area consists of two national parks, one on the north and one on the south, and the area is designated also as a nature park. It started in 2013, I would say. You know how in Rewilding Europe, the local NGO has recommended the area to be one of potential rewilding areas. And then after a year, they were accepted due to this tremendous beauty and due to this potential for rewilding. I have joined in 2020 as a team leader, and since then it was quite an adventure in every sense.
Marija, has it been more about protecting what you have than restoring nature? Because here in Britain, the emphasis has to be on restoring landscapes because we've lost so much. We don't really have places like the Velebit Mountains anymore. Even our remoter landscapes in the Highlands of Scotland, for example, or the Pennines, or the big upland moors of the south, Dartmoor, Exmoor, Bodmin, they've lost so much. So we really have to emphasize restoring ecosystems and reintroducing missing species and so on. But is it not the case that in the Velebit Mountains, it's all there already and you just want to protect it? Or have you had to engage in restoration activity?
Well, the situation is not like in UK, of course, but it is true. Our main goal is to promote the return of wild nature and to raise awareness of the need to preserve wildlife in Velebit and, of course, in other regions in Europe. But the activities are also about the restoration itself. I don't know if you're aware, but this whole area, it is zoned as a nature park, but forestry and hunting activities are also present there. So due to the fact that Velebit is abundant with 79 endemic species, we have 3 carnivores present, we have lots of small predators, lots of birds, but there are also, of course, some species who are endangered. We have brown bear, wolf, and lynx as the main carnivore species. And that, of course, means, again, due to the fact that the area is also a hunting area, it means also a large pressure on the coexistence. Because when you have 3 hunters in the area, if we exclude bear, even though bear do the same, it is a wolf and lynx and the hunter. So you need to have a really abundance of prey species in order to have the ecological balance in the area. And the area by itself, as I said, it is also the forestry area. So the division of land is between forestry, agriculture, and hunters. So that means there are also forest activities there. And that is also pressure on wildlife and habitats. So our goal and our aim is, of course, to restore natural processes and to reconnect man and wilder nature. But our huge efforts are in improving this transformation of hunting concession, of hunting grounds into one big wildlife corridor where animals feel free to forage, to breed, to know that there is, thrive there. And of course, the idea is to reduce in every sense, the hunting and forestry impact on the ground.
So this enormous landscape, more than 2,000 square kilometers, it's connected how with the other wild landscapes of Europe? Is it connected up towards the Carpathians, for example, or down towards the southern Balkans? Are there any corridors?
This is the Dinaric Alp area. So the whole area, what we've been building, as I said, is between two national parks, and our area where we manage, and we have 100% of management on 30,000 hectares, which is really a lot. So the idea is to establish a wildlife corridor towards the Slovenia and towards the north, and of course on the, let's say, southwest side over through the Lika Plains in Bosnia region.
And have you had to undertake any physical interventions? For example, the removal of fencing or the destruction of dams or weirs on the rivers, or any kind of engineering type works to improve the functioning of nature in this landscape?
Well, we did have a lot, but in ours, unlike other areas, especially, for example, Central Apennine, we didn't have fences in the area. As I said, the whole area is practically Natura 2000 area, so there are no fences over there. Mostly also because this is due to it's very abandoned area, and therefore, previous livestock practices were abandoned too. So no fences were there to remove. But what we've been doing, lots of activity that are connected with coexistence. That means we've been putting reflecting lights on the roads, because Velebit has a lot of roads that are cutting. We've been improving fences for the beehives that are also in the area, because the beekeepers also, they hold their hives into the area. So we've been trying to reduce this conflict between human and wildlife, because the increase of wildlife impose by itself a larger human-wildlife conflict. And there were also many functional and wildlife other activities, like we've been trying to improve densities of roe deers, of red deers especially. So, and you asked me about the river. Well, the Velebit is a karst area, so there is only one big river over there. It is a Lika River, and that is mostly connected to the area, to the lowland, which we have another, let's say, very large initiative, which is connected with natural grazing with semi-wild herbivores, horses and tauros. This is what we do with livestock owners. So in regards to river, we just didn't have the need at this point, because there are no rivers, dams, or some barriers that were on our radar at that point.
So it's fair to say that the three big areas of work that Rewilding Europe and your team are undertaking in the Velebit Mountains are to foster greater human-wildlife coexistence and to identify areas of conflict in order to mitigate those. Secondly, to build up the number of prey species through the management of hunting concessions. And I'd like to talk about that in a moment. Is you've gone and acquired hunting concessions, in effect, which gives you a certain amount of control over the way the landscape is managed. And thirdly, by bringing back some of the larger herbivores which have been missing from the landscape previously, such as the aurochs, or now known as the tauros, and the perhaps bison, wild horses, and so on. Are those the three main areas in which you're working?
Well, it is the different order, but yes, they are all very, like we said, we in Rewilding Velebit, we really include everything. There are priorities, of course, but everything is included. So yes, due to the fact that we were, and still are, I think the only NGO who is connected with conservation and who is managed such a big area in the terms of transforming hunting concession into better non-hunting practices. So that is where we really try to do our best in the sense of to have no-take zones, to have moratorium where necessary, to have a very strong connection with other hunting concessionary we trying also to recognize benefits of rewilding and to use that by themselves. And in this regards, we really have a large impact on those neighbors. We have so far signed several agreements with our neighbors who are also implementing rewilding activities in their hunting grounds. So this is one of the things. Of course, coexistence is something which comes naturally due to the fact that you have more animals, and when you have more animals, more human-wildlife conflict is possible. Very important is also forest activities that we have really enhanced in the last 3 years, and that is mostly connected in detecting large areas of potential old-growth forests who can be left to wilderness and who can be, selected as a area where no harvesting will be done over there. And one of very, very new, I would say, is marine rewilding that we have started. As I said, Velebit is really like a big wall between the coastal and continental, and we also have one of our rights in 4 islands, and we have also started to develop and to raise activities around marine in these area. Not just this is how we started, so yeah.
How did the hunters of the Velebit Mountains react to an organization like yours coming in and buying up these hunting rights and effectively taking control over their favorite hobby across very large swathes of the landscape? Were they angry? Did they push back initially? And how did you win them over?
Yeah, of course, in the beginning, they were very doubtful, first of all, they did doubt, do we know how to do the job in a sense, because we have to manage this big area. So they were afraid also that we are going to tell them what to do, and they were there, in the last 200 years, etc., etc. So yeah, that was a big challenge to actually be recognized between the hunters and the whole sector as a partner where they can only thrive with, and that we are not, that we could be on the same cause, finding same interest, because we have done several public opinions analyses where hunters by themselves believes that wildlife needs stronger protection. And if we are on that course, both, this is our similar interest. So they have to, of course, change some practices, if possible, completely shift their paradigm of awareness. But we've done that, we've tried really to do that very transparently, I would dare to say even gently, in order to do things with them together. And really what we did, we did recognize their opinion and their suggestions too, because they know very well the area. They know some things which we at that point didn't know. So, and I think they really appreciate this recognition that they are the one who were also in the past taking care of the wildlife and wild nature,
But what about the carnivores? Because there's a perception, whether it's in the Western United States or in Germany, Central Europe, or wherever, there's a perception among hunters that the carnivores will significantly dent the numbers of wild ungulates that they want to hunt. And so presumably you were at odds with these hunters around whether to protect wolves, lynx, bears, and so on.
Well, I would say, every community, and that also relates to hunters, there are different people there. There are some people who very well understand importance of carnivores in the area, and there are others who don't understand. So what we are trying to do, we really try to work with those who does understand. Because even though as much as we tried, to explain and to importance of carnivore for them as well, for the forest, for everything, for the whole balance of the whole ecosystem, there are always people who don't believe it until they see it. And when they see it, it's too late, The damage is done. As much as you are in the area, let's say your integrity and actually your consistency of being there and of doing the hard work, I think the people who are really sensitive on nature and wildlife, they respect that and they go alongside with you.
Marija, you've been a nature lover all your life, like me.
Yes, I have.
I loved hearing you when I was traveling in the Netherlands, and you gave us a wonderful presentation, which is how we met. It really shone through your own personal love of nature. What sort of changes have you seen in the landscape that you're working in the last few years with all of these restoration efforts and with the changes in behavior among the hunters and so on, in terms of nature uplift and returning species and returning abundance? Like what is making you feel most happy in recent years?
Well, I would say the trust, What I recognize in the last 6 years that I'm in Velebit and working strongly with hunters is that I think they have built trust in us, and also other way around. Of course, we are both careful. We still, are, I would not say two opposite sides, but I think they have found us like some kind of buffer zones where we can also understand their needs, and the other way around. So I would say there is a trust that was formed in these last years. And I think that was really very, very important for us to work on the ground with them. That is from the community point of view, and from the species density population, from the wildlife perspective. Of course, I have seen more wildlife than when I arrived. Now we are driving or walking or hiking, and you can see even a bear. Well, you have to be careful, but you can really see it. Of course, you will see chamois, you will see red deer. I was driving once with my ranger, and we were in the car, and there was one big, I've never seen that in my life, and I don't think I would ever see. And we were driving slowly because we were talking and discussing, and in front of us was a big gray wolf. That was something that really, he went very slowly across the road. And even my ranger, who is more in nature, who has seen more than I did, because he spends more time there, he's much more connected to the whole area. And he was astonished. Both of us, we just stopped breathing. And then he told me, Marija, go now and pay a lottery, because this is something which is really a mark. I don't ever seen you. I don't know if you are going to see that again.
Yeah, when I went hiking in the Carpathian Mountains and I went to visit Christoph and Barbara Promberge and their enormous project there, the wildlife guide who was looking after us told me that he'd been a wildlife guide for 8 years. And while he sees the signs of wolves and occasionally hears them, he's only seen wolves twice in his career. They're really, really hard to see, very secretive animals. All of our fear of wolves is totally misplaced. They're much more afraid of us than we are of them.
That is true. That is true, and we are trying really to change that in many other ways. Now we are actually in the process of finishing a book about changing the myth of the wolf. It is actually a literature. It is not an article. So we've done some researches in order to have all the necessary information to start really shifting this myth of the big bad wolf. And yes, that is very challenging. The predators in the area that can create sometimes problem, especially for the livestock, because most of the livestock really depends on the income from selling their cattle and everything. So when the damage happens, it would really be necessary to have some good When I don't say they don't exist, there are national instruments for that, for the repayment, but the speed of the implementation of those activities to be paid in time, that is something that definitely needs to be improved.
What is the economy then in the Velebit Mountains? It's so remote, presumably it's not very good farmland. So you've got a little bit of livestock production. The hunting is a recreational pursuit.
That is true.
So how do people make a living in this landscape?
Well, the area, like I said, it is abandoned a lot, but previously, there was this motor highway that passed through Zadar, which is then passing the main city of Lika-Seine, where the area is, because the Velebit Mountain is in this county of Lika-Seine County. So I would say that they are building tourism also based on this nature. There is some livestock, people do have livestock, and they also build their livelihood around that. And of course, trade, you have some construction companies over there. There are 5,000 people in the main capital of Lika-Seine County, So there is no big industry so far. We are also would like to stay that way.
So what would a typical tourist do there? Where do they arrive? What do they do? How do they leave?
Well, this is what we've been working strongly, to improve livelihood in building tourism activities there. So far, the only thing which was there is fewer apartments, accommodation. Like I said, the coast is only 40 kilometers, so people did use some of the, let's say, cabins or some of the apartments over there to sleep during the night in cold on the 18 degrees, and then in the summer to go to swim, because it's very close, it's only, as I said, 40 minutes. But what was missing that seriously, it was this tourism offer was very, very weak. So there were only apartments to sleep over. And this is what we've been building, to, first of all, to enhance this natural heritage that it is, and to do all the marketing activities around that. And we have built also several tourism products as Rewilding Velebit. And so what do you do there? As I said, we have developed in Lika Plains a safari with wild herbivores and semi-wild horses, hopefully bison soon. So that is something very unique. I'm very proud to announce that Rewilding Velebit is the first entity in Croatia who has built vulture feeding site in our area. So also we are trying to have a griffon vulture back in Velebit, and to hopefully have nesting somewhere close over there. Several hiking and several tourism products have been built in the last 6 years, but you can check this all on our website.
Marija, what are the biggest threats to your project and to nature generally in that part of Croatia?
Well, the biggest threat is always that we have our, hunting grounds that we want to transform, and we are really doing lots of our work on the governance level in terms of shifting, changing legislation that could improve. So I think the threat is that the people do not recognize the importance to preserve and to restore Velebit as Velebit, and to just reject what we've been doing so far, which I think is not very possible, but that is also one threat which is for sure there. You also must understand that we are the NGO, so definitely income streams, we also do have our own income from the tourism products and everything, but this is also something we need to have very good viable model that can also be proven for others to be used. A lack of support, a lack of hearing, and definitely it can be a big threat if on the national level, if the country decide to have, to build apartments around Velebit, which would be crazy, because you cannot build apartments in Velebit, which is great. Maybe I'm too optimistic, to be honest. Maybe I'm too optimistic so far, but this is what I've, let's say, detected right now.
This episode of Rewilding the World is very kindly brought to you by Uni, that's UNI, the world's first nature-friendly line of luxury body care. We've all heard about the harm that sun cream does to coral reefs, but it's not just sun cream and it's not just coral reefs. Well, Uni makes plastic-free, nature-friendly essentials like shampoo, conditioner, hand wash, and even natural deodorant, all full of nourishing ingredients such as seaweed kelp, aloe vera, and olive oil. We've been loving our Uni products, but don't take it from me. Here's my wife, Jemima.
Yes, I really love them. They're such clean and nourishing products. The microalgae body oil is so good and really smells amazing.
You can find Uni products at Space NK or at weareuni.com. And what are your dreams for this landscape? What would you do if a philanthropist called you up and said, we want to turbocharge your work with significant funding? How would you spend that money, and what would you do to expand your reach and your capability there?
We do have so many plans, that you cannot imagine, from the in scaling up our areas into more areas where we can implement our work, where we can support rewildings on, and when you have the management of the area, you really are on the ground. You can change things, change practices, and so definitely I would increase the whole area in every sense.
So what you mean by that is buying more hunting permits?
Well, that's true. That is one of the things. But definitely we would use some of the funding to support really, really those partners who want to scale up rewilding in their areas. We would really support with our activities there, because I hope that soon there will be some national mechanism that will support some of the hunters who want to reduce hunting and to improve wildlife watching. And that the state by itself is going somehow to support them to build a story around that, because that would be very important.
And what about the building up of large herbivores? You've mentioned wild horses, you mentioned the possibility of bison. I think I mentioned aurochs or taurus. I think that's what struck me when I went to Carpathia, with these big herds of bison. I couldn't believe it. And in Pedro Prata's project, Rewilding Portugal, the Greater Coa Valley, they've got growing herds of Soraya horses and so on. Is the Velebit Mountains suited to these larger herds of big herbivores?
Well, at the moment, like I've said, we have them in the lowland, in the Lika Plains. But of course, in the past, there were cattle who was foraging and roaming during the summer in the mountain. And during the winter, of course, because these are, in Velebit, you have very strong winter, sometimes minus 25 degrees. So during the winter, the animals went down. So even though there are also some horses, free horses there. So yes, and the pasture areas, meadow areas in the mountain for sure can be great for large grazers over there. That is what we hope for, that eventually really we could have this corridor of movement. But for now, they are on Lika Plains, and really also large areas, very, very large, up to 2,000 hectares, and it can be even increased, and to 3,500. So I hope in future that would be possible, but for now they are in the meadows.
Does Croatian law allow you to do that though? Because in this country, even if you have the land and you're rewilding the land, if you want to have large herbivores that are not domestic livestock, you have to have kind of zoo permits, or you have to comply with dangerous wild animal permits and have these incredibly high fences. And the law is really prohibitive when it comes to using large wild or semi-wild herbivores in rewilding. And hopefully that's changing, and there's a bit of an effort now to look at all of that. What's the law like in Croatia around bison, for example?
Well, around bisons, semi-wild, large herbivores, they're, according to the law, they are marked as a mixed animal. It's not autochthonous breed. So, for example, if we would bring bisons over there, at the beginning, it would be recorded as a livestock. It would not be recorded as wild animals. And then you are building a story trying to get the wilder status of the bisons, let's say. What we are doing is we do the same for Taurus, One of the first steps is for the Taurus is that we want to have these as a separate breed, because that is the first step to have a wilder status. Because so far they don't have this wild status, Everything is recorded as a livestock.
And you have countries in the region that have got a much more enlightened view regarding these species. Poland, for example,
exactly.
Romania, in the Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Georgia. So I think there are interesting templates. And even in Spain, I have a friend called Fernando Moran, who's part of our large herbivore working group, and he is bringing back bison as well as Przewalski horses and kulans and other things into rewilding projects in the Iberian Peninsula. And he's close to getting approvals from some of the large Spanish provinces for bison to be classified as wildlife rather than as livestock, which changes everything because you don't have to do the TB testing. You don't need all this kind of livestock management. You can treat them like deer or wild boar. So I think that's a really exciting thing. I think, in fact, that is Rewilding Europe's, perhaps their most exciting line of work, is restoring large numbers of big wild herbivores across Europe as a way, for example, of mitigating wildfire in the Mediterranean and creating more resilient mosaic landscapes. I think that's a really exciting area of work. Marija, I'd love to visit the Velebit Mountains one day. Can you just describe to me a little bit, please, the culture, like the festivals in the towns? You gave me a wonderful description when we last spoke about certain times of year in the villages and the music and the dancing. And I know you're working within that context in order to promote the love of nature and connection with nature. Can you just describe to me what I might expect if I came with my family into the Velebit Mountains in that sense?
I would always recommend to come either in May or in September, maybe better September. End of September, there's this big festival. It's a fair of 3 days where the whole county gather. Of course, the locals, they present their products. There are also other people from Croatia which they come and they also, present. It's a big fair where in the morning, let's say in the afternoon, you have all this, food and singing and of course you have some theater show as well. So I would say these 3 days, the city really thrives, because there is a movement of people, and they have this moment where even people from Croatia outside the Velebit borders, even from the east part of Croatia, they really understood the beauty of the area. I know many people in Zagreb, that they know that the Velebit exists, but they've never been and visited, So this also always brings the opportunity when you come in the area to respect and to the nature what you have by your origin. And that is something, which also invite us all for some kind of, for the strong feeling of responsibility, And this is what I see when we have these gatherings where the local people gather. And their rewilding is also very well recognized. There are many people coming to ask us about our work, also to may have pictures with us. We have worked strongly with children because we believe it's important, from your young age to be aware of the nature values. So, I would say that this period of the year is very, very, very interesting when this fair begins.
Marija, you're such an inspiration to me. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me on the podcast. You're living the dream, really. As someone who grew up with a deep love of nature and a deep love of your place, where you're from, and you're creating a tremendous difference. And I hope very much I have the chance to come and see you in person and bring my family and have some beautiful wildlife and cultural experiences in your part of Croatia.
Yeah, that would be a great ban. So, of course, you're very welcome. Hope you will come to visit us soon. And that we can, show you all of our work on the ground. That would be really nice.
I think Rewilding Europe is one of my favorite charities in the whole world. And what they're doing across Europe is just amazing. And it was a joy talking to Marija about their particularly exciting project in the Velebit Mountains, a place I really long to visit. Thanks for listening to the episode. Please do make sure your friends and colleagues know about Rewilding the World. It all makes a big difference. Give us a like or a review on whatever platform you use to get your podcasts. You've probably noticed the birdsong starting to change in your garden. The little warblers and other African migrants are starting to arrive back now in Europe and Britain. But they've run the gauntlet of a lot of hunters. They get trapped and glued and shot in devastating numbers across the Mediterranean region. For the next episode, I'm going to be talking to Lloyd Scott of the Committee Against Bird Slaughter. Lloyd and his colleagues are really doing something about this problem, taking the fight to both the illegal and the legal killing of migrating birds around the Mediterranean basin.